Hello and welcome to Introduction to Programming 4.2 Lab 2. We've been working with if statements and if-else statements, and you've probably been reading through hopefully the information on nested linear ifs and things like that. This particular lab is a two-parter, and this is a lab where you're going to get into a situation where you can have decisions as far as how you program this. And I'll show you different ways that you can program. So yours may be a little bit different than mine. That's okay, as long as it's programmed using some of the techniques and things we've described in class and in your labs. I'm fine with that. And I'll point out where that you may have different options and stuff as we go through, beyond just naming your variables differently. So go ahead and open it up in your browser and open it up in your IDE, whatever you're using. I'm going to be using Visual Studio. And then in the lab steps, the first part is we're going to write a program that creates a greeting based on a code and a name. So we're going to ask the user, what's your name? And we're going to ask them for a code A, B, C, or D. Now, I mentioned just a few moments ago where your code may look a little differently. There's some things to consider when you're creating a program like this, such as how much do we hard code in. I try to stay away from hard coding as much as possible because usually that saves me time down the road. It takes me longer on the front end, but it saves me on the back end when enhancements need to be made or changes. The other things need to be considered, and we're not going to really address it in this particular lab, but some things when you're programming you need to think through. Okay, I'm asking my user to enter A, B, C, or D. What happens if they enter E or F or 1 or 2 and things like that? So there's some testing and validation that should probably be a part of a program like this in production. We're not going to concern ourselves with that at this point because the goal of this lab is to get you to work with if-else and if statements and linear nested if statements and to make sure that you understand how they go. So let's dive into our planning list here. If you see here, I have, first of all, a planning list. My input variables are the code and the name. I'm going to ask the user the name and what code they want. And then output variables. And here's also where you may have a difference in your program versus mine. I'm going to output their name because I'm going to greet them, because we're going to greet them with one of these 4 greetings based on what code they choose. But I actually have the 4 greetings I'm going to store in a variable. You could hard code those into your if-else statements. That's I've of course done, and I've seen that. The reason why I try to stay away from that and I try to use variables as much as possible is, let's say you're creating this robust greeting application and your boss comes to you and say, hey, I want to change the B greeting. Well, let's say you've used that in several ifs and stuff throughout your code. You'll have to go through and change that wherever you change it. Whereas if you use just a variable like this, you only have one spot to go to change it. And I'll show you that when we get in the code. And then for the checklist, I'm going to again prompt the user for their name, prompt them for their code. I'm going to convert the code to uppercase. And I'll explain that as we go through the code. But basically, you know, someone could put in a capital A or a lowercase a, and they're thinking, well, I'm putting in an A. They asked for an A. When I'm asking for an uppercase A, I want to make sure I'm comparing apples to apples, so to speak. And so I'll show you how to do that in the code. And then I'm going to assign that user entry, whatever they ask for, to the greetings. And then the user code, that is. Then I'm going to use if-else statements to output the greeting based upon their code. So for my test plans, I'm going to put in Bob and A, and I should get hello Bob, how are you? John and B, top of the morning to you John. Jane and C, hi Jane. So let me refresh my screen here, and let's just test it, and then I'll show you the code. First Bob, and then A. Go through, that's part B there. And I got hello Bob, how are you? And then John, and then B. Notice I put in a lowercase, and it says top of the morning to you John. And then I've got Jane and C. Cancel out the part 2 there. And I've got hi Jane. Now how did we do this? Let's go to the code here. So first of all, I got my variable section with my username, user code, ABCD greeting. Again, you may do that differently. You may choose not to use variables. You're going to at least have to have a username and code, user code variable. But I chose to use the greeting variables. And then I have where I'm prompting them for their name. and then I'm prompting them for the code. Now here is an interesting line of code that you may or may not have seen before. I'm basically saying take whatever user code they put in and make sure it is uppercase. And the reason why I'm doing that is I'm going to be doing some comparisons in my if statements, and if I do a comparison between lowercase a and uppercase a, it's not going to come out. So I'm saying I want you to convert it to uppercase. If they've already put in uppercase, not a big deal, it's not going to do anything. If they put in lowercase, it's going to convert it for us. Then I'm storing my 4 greetings, hello, and I'm just using concatenation with their username to store the greetings in the 4 variables. Then onto our logic and output section. So I'm saying if the user code is equal to A, document write the A greeting. If it's B, document write the B greeting, C greeting, and D greeting, and so on. And that allows us to do Clay, A, I'll do lowercase. Actually, I'll do D because we haven't done that yet. And then that's part 2, so let me cancel that. And it says, Clay is here, welcome. Okay. Now, on to part 2. For part 2, scroll down here, this one is a little more complex, and there are several ways. As you get more complexity in your programs, there's several ways to go about it. So again, yours may look a little differently. I do want to make sure you use some nested if-elses for this. You'll see I have one nested, and you'll see how I've done this. Again, you may use some more confirmations versus what I do as far unless instead of prompts. It's perfectly fine to do that, and I'll point those things out to you where yours may be a little differently, but I want to show you how I did mine. So we're going to ask the user for an ice cream. They get 2 choices, vanilla or chocolate. Now, again, like with the A, B, C, and D in part 1, the thing that does not exist in our code here is, let's say our end user says, well, I don't want vanilla or chocolate, I want strawberry. Well, we would probably work into our program, sorry, those choices aren't available, you need to choose either vanilla or chocolate. The other thing that you'll see as you go through my code is I'm not checking for spelling, meaning someone could spell vanilla with 1 L, and then my code's going to fall on its face with that. We don't have that in here. That's with some error checking and what are called try catches, and maybe doing it in a little bit different interface to help alleviate that. So we're not going to concern ourselves with that at this point, but just so you think through, okay, how would I build this and how do I protect things so the end user has a good experience. But in this case, we're just going to ask them vanilla or chocolate. If they choose vanilla, they get 2 topping choices, M&M's or Reese's Pieces. If they choose chocolate, they get 2 topping choices, brownies or Oreos. Now, either one, if they choose vanilla or chocolate, M&M's, Reese's, brownies or Oreos, either one of those, then we ask them, do you want whipped cream? And if they do, then they get a choice if they want a cherry or not, and then we're going to output it. So in my list of input variables, these are the ones I have. Again, you may do yours a little bit differently. Again, what I'm checking for here is nested if-elses, but here's how I did mine. I have an ice cream variable, M&M's, Reese's, brownies, Oreos, whipped cream, cherry, and output message to hold all those pieces of information. Then I'm going to be outputting the ice cream, Reese's. Actually, let me check that because that's not actually what I'm doing. The only thing I'm going to be outputting is output message. So sorry, let me fix that there. Okay. So the only thing I'm outputting is the output message. You'll see as I go through my code, I try to keep things as simple as possible. Why make it more complex than it needs to be? So I'm storing their selections in here, and then I'm going to use concatenation with a compound operator to store everything in one variable and then output just that one variable. So here's how the process is going to work. I'm going to prompt the user for their ice cream. I'm going to lowercase it to make sure we compare it appropriately, just like we did the uppercase above. I'm going to store that information in the output message variable. I'm going to use if-else statements. Now, we're going to mix up a little bit our prompts where in previous labs we've prompted everything through the assignment section. We got to mix it up a little bit here because we don't know what we're going to ask them until they've made their first selection of vanilla or chocolate. So I'm going to utilize if-else statements to determine the flavor and then ask for whatever toppings, brownies, Oreos, Reese's, or M&M's. And then I'm going to store that information again in the output message variable. Then I'm going to ask them for whipped cream, store it, utilize an if statement to see if they want a cherry, and then store that. And so here's some tests we can do. Vanilla M&Ms, you're having vanilla ice cream with M&Ms, enjoy. And then chocolate brownies, whipped cream, cherry, you're having chocolate ice cream, brownies, whipped cream, cherry on top, enjoy. And then vanilla, Reese's, whipped cream, cherry, you're having vanilla ice cream with Reese's Pieces, enjoy. So let me test a few of those. So get past part 1 here. I want vanilla, and oh, we got a mistake in our code. I'm going to have to fix that, which is a good thing that we can check to see whether our code is working or not. So you can see, even when you've been programming as long as I have, you make mistakes. So see, I've got a mistake because I selected vanilla, but it asked me for brownies, and I shouldn't have them make that choice. So let's jump to my code, and then I'll come back and run my tests. That's the reason why we have tests. So here I have my variables: ice cream, M&M's, Reese's, brownies, Oreos, whipped cream, cherry, output message. Then I'm prompting them, select the flavor, chocolate or vanilla. Then I'm doing it to lowercase. So setting it to lowercase, make sure. And then I start my output message, you are having. That's the start of our message. And you'll see I'm going to use compound operators to add that in. Okay, and then I'm outputting and saying, if ice cream is equal to chocolate, I'm adding to my output message, they're having chocolate ice cream. See down here in my else, I'm adding vanilla ice cream. Then with the chocolate, I'm going to prompt them, would you like M&M's or Reese's on your ice cream? Let me make sure I got this right for my... Okay, if they choose vanilla, it's M&M's or Reese's. Chocolate is brownies. That's what I thought. I got these backwards. So that's why I thought that was weird with the way it outputted. So I'm just going to switch these around real quick. And hold on. Let me do this right. Okay. Make sure I get the whole thing. Sorry, I'm getting trigger happy on my keyboard here. There we go. Okay. So I store the output message, the chocolate ice cream, and then using my, in this case, brownie Oreos variable, I'm prompting them again. Do you want brownies or Oreos on your ice cream? And then I use again a compound operator with whatever they chose, brownies or Oreos. Then if they chose vanilla, I'm doing the same thing. It's just I'm asking for M&M's and Reese's, and then using compound operator to add that in. Then after that, I'm asking them, and this time I'm not using a prompt, I'm using a confirm message. Do you want whipped cream? Yes or no. So this is where they can click OK or cancel. If an end user clicks OK, the result is going to be true. It's going to store true in here. If they click cancel, it's going to store false. So I'm testing if they're true. You could test if they're false or what have you. And this is where you could have done yours a little differently. You could use confirmed for up here. I think it makes your code longer, but you could do that. Like you could ask them individually, do you want brownies? OK or cancel. Do you want Oreos? OK or cancel. The enhancement to that is you're giving your end user the choice to have brownies and Oreos. In mine, I give them a choice. Do you want brownies or Oreos? You can't have both. So here we're confirming, do they want whipped cream, yes or no. If they do want whipped cream, let me back that up. Let me rephrase that. If they don't want whipped cream, then we just go down to output the message, enjoy. They do not get a choice of a cherry. If they do want whipped cream, so it returns true, then I'm compound operating, adding whipped cream to my output message. Then I ask them using a confirm message, do you want a cherry, yes or no? If they say yes, then I add and a cherry on top. So I'm building this sentence and storing it using compound operators in my output message variable. And then the last thing I got to do with that is put the word enjoy in there. And a side note, when you're doing this, one of the things that you have to watch is your spacings. You see how I have some spacings in here, like right there. Otherwise, you get a kind of a run-on sentence that doesn't make sense. And then the reason I'm doing it that way is all I have to do then is document write out my output message. Now, another way you could have done this without using an output message variable is I could have document writes mixed in here if I wanted to. And so I could document write, you know, with brownies Oreos, document write with M&M's Reese's, you know, document write with whipped cream, that sort of thing. And then by the time I got down to here, I would not need this line, but I would have document writes in here. I've seen it done either way. I just personally like to do document writes as clean as possible, and this is just my personal choice. So let's test this here. Refresh, get past part 1. Okay, I want vanilla. Would you like M&M's or Reese's Pieces on top? I'm going to choose M&M's. Would you like whipped cream on top? Yes. Would you like a cherry on top? Yes. And then it says you're having vanilla ice cream with M&M's, whipped cream, and a cherry on top. Enjoy. Okay, I'm going to do it again through my testing here. So I want vanilla. I want M&M's. I do not want whipped cream. So it should not have even asked me for the cherry. I should get this result. You're having vanilla ice cream with M&M's. Enjoy. And that's what I got. Now test 2, I'm going to do chocolates, brownies, whipped cream, and cherry. So chocolate, brownies, and I do want whipped cream, and I do want a cherry, and I should get this statement, and I do down here. You're having chocolate ice cream with brownies, whipped cream, and a cherry on top. My last test, vanilla, Reese's, whipped cream, cherry. So vanilla, Reese's Pieces, whipped cream, cherry. Let's see how it worked out. You're having vanilla ice cream with Reese's Pieces, whipped cream, and a cherry on top. So this is just an example of how you can interact with the user in different ways, having nested if statements to provide a nice experience for the end user, asking them for information, kind of holding their hands and making it nice and clean. So I hope that's makes sense to you guys. If you have any questions, just ask, and happy coding.